Welcome to the show, folks, now that I've got the microphone working. My apologies for that, and I had managed one of the best introductions I've ever managed for this live stream, and the flipping microphone wasn't working. The light was on, as it should be when it's working, but what had happened was that the software over here had stopped seeing the microphone. I really don't know why. I had tested it earlier. I always do. Right. So now I know who was listening and who wasn't. Right. Let me start right back at the beginning then. So welcome to the show. And thank you for tearing yourselves away from Boris and his address to the nation. But tonight isn't about Boris Johnson. Tonight is about organisation. No, tonight is about image organisation. So let's have a look at what we're going to be doing tonight. But before we do that, let me just fill in anyone who's new to the show and tell you a little bit about them. These shows are weekly, every Sunday night at 7:30, and I promise you, one of these weeks I am going to get this show without a technical snafu like we just had with the microphone. Right, the shows stay on YouTube in full for quite a while, then they get moved over to my academy, and a cut down version is put on YouTube at that point. But I do post regular extracts from it as their own self-contained videos on YouTube. So hopefully you're not going to miss out on anything when I do take them down. There are certain bits of the shows which I want to keep in reserve for my Academy members, which is why I take them down after a length of time, so that those become exclusive for my paying Academy members on there. Do ask questions in chat. Do let me know when there are technical snafus, like no audio in chat. Thank you for doing that, folks. If you're watching this on one of the replays, please put a comment in to say who you are and say hello in the comments so that I know that you're watching. Most people have introduced themselves in the live chat for those who are live. So good evening, Stuart, Michael, Terry, Ron, Peter, Kev. Thank you for joining me. I know you're on there every week. I really do appreciate it, folks, who are tuning in each week for these live streams. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do on YouTube. It really does help me, and I've got to get to that 1,000 subscriber level, and I'm only at 257 at the last count, so I'm only just over a quarter of the way, so I really need to find some more on there. Please comment on the videos, not just on the live stream, but on some of the other videos. If you're watching them, just please put a comment in, just so that I know you've watched it. It is a real encouragement, because you put them out there, and yes, there's stats to say people have clicked on them and there's a certain amount of watch time, but we just don't know if people are appreciating them, and just to know that is a real encouragement to make more. If you don't like them, also say so. Tell me what's wrong with them if you don't like it. If they're boring, say so, and I'll try and fix that. So do that, and like them as well. I hate having to ask for likes. It's all very geeky and really not me at all at that. But YouTube does put a lot of emphasis on interaction with the videos. and it takes into account likes and thumbs down actually. They both count as interaction, and videos which get a response are ones that YouTube will promote more. So it does help. So whilst you're twiddling your thumbs now, just go and hit the like button on this one. That'll really help. Share the links as well. I really want to thank those of you who've been doing that. I know Peter has, I know Terry has, sharing them with various people, and that I appreciate that going on. So thank you for doing it. My usual plug for the Academy will come up every so often. Subscribe to the newsletters. And if you want to send me images for the 3-minute challenge, let me know. The way I'm working on this is that anyone who's never had an image done on the 3-minute challenge will get priority. If you've had one done, then you'll be on the, you'll get priority over anybody who's had multiple, more than one done. I'm trying to keep it as fair as possible. If you'd like to have a go on that, even if you have submitted before, I will take some more, but you'll be in rotation, of course, on that. And there's something new going to be happening. As of next week, I have got a new segment for the show, which is a photographer showcase. And the way the photographer showcase works is that it's 10 questions from me. I will supply them basically in written form, but I'm asking those taking part just to record themselves, whether it's phone or whatever, and send me their answers as video, preferably. Audio will do if you don't want to appear on camera, and I will edit it together as an interview. But the aim is to showcase your photographs, and the opportunity is for you to share your photographs with myself and with YouTube, and out of it will come the showcase, which will appear as part of the live stream, and then that will spin off as its own video, which I'll let you have a copy of for your own YouTube channel as well if you want. It will probably go up on mine as well. So looking for volunteers on that with it. Basically, it's a chance for you to show off and share your work. So what have we got this week? Well, we've got the quick news roundup, live Q&A. I'm going to be talking about image organization in 2 parts of this tonight. We've got the 3-minute Lightroom edit challenge with contributions from myself and from Rick on there. And we'll finish with live Q&A. So what's been happening this week? For me, I've been spending most of the week preparing stuff for YouTube, and I've had videos up there 5 days running now, something like that. Tuesday was a Lightroom 2-minute tip about the before and after function, and something that most people probably don't know that it can do, which really extends the use of it. Wednesday I posted a studio shoot about studio lighting for pinups, a very simple setup that you can recreate in the studio for those of you who are studio photographers. Thursday was my latest blog post on the website. Those are going out on Thursdays, and that was the latest in the 7 Deadly Sins series. And this week was sloth. So that was all about the sin of sloth with photography and how that affects us as photographers and how we can overcome it and things to look out for on that. Thursday I did a bonus video as well, which was effectively a replay from one of the early live streams, which was the photo critique that Rick and I did of Tommy Reynolds' photo of Peter. Friday was travelogue day. I'm trying to do a travelogue out every Friday, and that's the wrong image for it. It says it's the Azores. It wasn't. It was Antigua, and it was me going swimming in Antigua and going on a trip around the island and doing photography around there. So sorry, wrong heading on that. Right, Saturday I did another bonus one. Again, it was extracted from one of the live streams, so if you didn't see it at the time, it was all about working with OpenShade and diffusers, and it's going to be a series of 3 which I'll try and get out over the next week or so as a complete set on there for anyone who missed it as part of the live stream, streaming that off as its own little mini series on the YouTube channel. Right, let's move on to our 3-minute Lightroom challenge. I think most of you know how this works by now, but very quick recap. Image supplied to me. I don't see it beforehand. I don't look at how it's been processed by the person who sent it in beforehand. And I have 3 minutes to do an edit on it. And I set the same challenge to Rick Bradbury, who also does the same edit or whatever his edit is, within 3 minutes. So first of all, let's have a look at Rick's edit of an image sent in by Terry Hewitt.
And welcome to another 3-minute Lightroom edit challenge. My name's Rick Bradbury. I'm doing this pre-recorded, ready for Ian's live stream, which I believe is tomorrow evening. The image sent in today has been sent in by Terry Hewitt, so thank you, Terry, for sending it in. This is not the image that we see here. This is just a holding image. And whilst we're on this holding image, just quickly, the reason behind this is in my Facebook group, I've started doing a meter readings log with a standardized lighting setup to see what output we get out of different lights. So if anyone's interested in that, hit me up in the group, or you'll find it in the file section of the group. I'm also putting together a flash durations log as well, just so people can make an informed decision if they're looking at purchasing the Pixar Pro line of lights, aka Godux, etc, etc. So let's get on with the edit. So I shall bring my timer up on the phone. Because the phone always goes to sleep as I'm whittering on, and we will hit start. 3 minutes on the clock, and let's go to the image. Now, this is not the final image, this is the original raw file, I believe, and Terry's edit, I believe, is that file. Correct me if I am wrong. However, here we go. Right, so we will sort this out. Now, first of all, it is rather underexposed, and it was shot with a Sony something or other, looking at that model number. Don't understand why they use that, but there you go. 6-second f5.6 ISO 200 at an 18-250 lens. First thing I think we'll need to do is sort out that wonky horizon. So we shall bring this in to about here and hit that. The actual subject isn't completely straight in terms of all of it. I mean, that bit's straight, but anyway, there we go. So I think what we will do, will it work in black and white? No, I think it just goes too dull and flat for black and white, so we're going to go with colour. We're going to lift the exposure a good half, 3/4 of a stop to begin with. Let's just slightly warm that up, and probably actually go now. Okay, oh, won't do that. Won't do that. Let's sort the colour out. Oh wait. Okay, it was good where it was. A little bit of global contrast, highlights will pump up a little bit. Now, in fact, let's go to the curve. Most of my retouching work or editing is fairly simple, as you guys will probably know. I don't do a load of work myself on the images, so hopefully going forward with these, the biggest value will be the feedback on the images, if I, of course, can give some. I'm not saying I will definitely be able to. I'd like to know what this thing is or was. Anybody care to answer? We'll pump up the highlights a little bit. Probably go up a little bit there. Now, this is a fairly soft image, out of focus, blurry. I don't know whether this was on the tripod or it was a handheld, braced maybe against something. if you've braced the camera against something and it's a windy day, you're going to struggle still. You may even struggle with a tripod, to be honest with you. Well, there we go. Let's pump in a little bit of texture, a little bit of clarity, and don't want to dehaze too much. It just brings in a bit of contrast. And then we will do a little bit of sharpening, and we are done. And there it is. Boom, dismiss. A fairly quick edit on this one, and I shall be back shortly with a little bit of feedback on the image as well. So we'll pass this back to Ian.
Right, thank you to Rick for his edit on there. Double checking the microphone's still working. Yes, good. Right, I'll be doing my edit shortly, but that was Rick's. And it's quite interesting. We always seem to take different approaches with these images. Right, let's move on. Question and answer, part 1. So really just to say, if you've got any questions, get them into the chat. Anything that needs you'd like me to answer, any photography related. Remember, there is a delay. It's about 30 seconds or so at the moment from when I speak to when you hear me. So do take that into account when you put questions in there. It may take me a while to realise on that. You can always email me questions during the week to contact me at ianstudio.co.uk. So this week I had a question, well actually I had 2 questions, but they were both boiled down to the same thing from 2 different people, from Karina and also from Christine, who wanted to know all about organising images, and in particular in one case about how to avoid duplicate files, because she thought she had quite a few duplicates on her system. Now, I can't give a full answer to all of that, but what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to talk a little bit about the principles of organising images, namely filing conventions and naming conventions, and then next week I'm going to look at some techniques to automate that to try and keep on top of your images. So for those of you in the live chat, I'm assuming that you all have naming conventions for your images. Would you like to put into the live chat for me what your naming convention is for your images? And then later on, I'll compare that with what I do. So please enlighten us and see whether there's any similarity between what you do and what I do on file naming conventions for images. Right, but let's get started with the other side of it, which is all about organising the images. And I want to just start with a quote. "What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet." And that's by William Shakespeare. And basically, what he's saying there is that names don't matter. It's the content that matters. Well, actually, when it comes to digital photography, that is not true. Naming does matter, because without it, you're going to get yourself into problems further down the line. And there's 2 halves to it, as I've said. There is the naming of your folder structure and the naming of your files in there. So let's start at the very beginning with this. And the place to start is with your camera. And it seems strange to actually say this, but the number of photographers I have come across, particularly when I've been working on the cruise ships, who don't bother to set the date and time on their camera is quite large. And by doing that, by setting that, that is the first point to getting organised with all your images. And you'll see as we go on with this how that is used to organise things. So set the date and time in your camera, because when you start to automate, it can use that to get everything organized, and it will take you half the way to where you need to be. Why bother though? Well, even if you don't think you're going to be a prolific photographer, the number of images you have will very soon get out of hand. Such was the case with the two people who asked me about this question. They came to me and said, the reason they've come to me with this question is the images have got out of hand. They don't know where everything is. They don't know what they've got where. So be aware of that and sort it out early on in your photographic journey. I don't know. I know some of you are beginners on there, and hopefully there'll be some beginners watching this on the replay. But do adopt that early on. It will pay dividends years down the line for you to get that right. Both in terms of where you file your images and what you call them. And I always suggest start with a single top level folder. And my recommendation to people is get one disk just for your images. Nothing else. It's just purely your work disk for everything to do with your photography. And on there, create one folder right at the very top, for example, photos. And underneath that is where you will store the master copies of everything. Keep them in one place. Why do that? Because that means you've got one structure then to back up. You've got one place to manage instead of having them scattered around all over the place. One thing to avoid is do not use, if you're on a Windows machine, do not use the pictures folder or my pictures or whatever Windows wants to call it at the moment, because that is just a recipe for disaster waiting to happen, because lots of applications will write to that, will control it, will do things with it. And what you want is to control it all yourself so that you haven't got random programs changing the files. There's a moment you try to save something from a browser. Where does it offer it? The pictures folder. And that will get out of hand so quickly. So what about a folder structure for everything? Well, there's two ways of approaching it, either date-based or category-based. I know some people who do them category-based, and you need to decide what works for you, which approach to go. I'm going to be recommending date-based, but let's have a look at the category-based one first, and how you might use it and why you might use it, and more likely why you probably don't want to use it. I think category-based is limiting, and I think it causes problems further down the line. So, for example, if you were a wildlife photographer, maybe you'd have a category for mammals and a category for birds. But what happens when you photograph a bird sitting on an ox's head? Do you file it under birds or under ox? Maybe you're not. You don't need something quite at that level. But what about, and this is more common than you might think, people have a folder for, say, the travel images, the family photos, and then another one might be for the portrait work that they're doing. But then what happens if you're in Rome and you're doing a shoot that encompasses part of Rome, but also encompasses portraiture? Do you file it under portraits or under travel? And you start to have problems with that sort of way of working. The times when a category-based system may work is if you've got something like, if you're a wedding photographer and you just need to keep all that separate from everything else, because it's a one hit, you do the job, archive it, and that's it. And I can see a value in working with that for a particular type of work. But for a lot of us, the boundaries between the categories merge, and then it becomes difficult to decide where to file things based on category. My preference is a date-based system. And the advantage of a date-based system is you're never going to have a problem to know where to file something. Not only that, most of us can remember approximately when something was shot, and then if you use additional labels, as I'm going to talk about as we go on, that will help narrow it down. So it's not just a date, it's a date plus a label to help you find things on there. So if you're going to work on a date-based system, this is what I recommend. What you need to do, under that top level folder, that photos folder, create a folder for each year. So you might have 2017, 18, 19, 20 as different levels within that folder structure. Then underneath there, you may need to create a subfolder for each month. Now that, whether you need to do that really depends on how prolific you are as a photographer. If you only ever shoot when you're on holiday, or you only do half a dozen shoots in the year, then you probably don't need a next level down on that. For someone like myself, as a professional, in a given month, I might have a dozen to 20 shoots. Ideally, in a given month, I should have 31 shoots, but that doesn't always happen. And so if I was not to have a month structure, I'd have hundreds under that top level, and that would become unmanageable for me. So I prefer to have a month level in there, one level down. But if you're only shooting, if in a given year you might only shoot 20 to 30 different shoots, you don't need the month level. Everything per year would be sufficient for you. So you'd end up with either this sort of level of structure that we've got here, which is photos, year, month, or you'd end up with something looking... Oh, I thought I had another... no, I know where I am. Right, yeah, underneath that level, either under the year or under the month, create a folder for each shoot that you do and base that on the date. And add to that a label, a little tag, so that you can see. So in this example, you can see I've got photos, year, month folder, and then a date folder with a tag on the end of it. Now, I prefer, and this is purely personal, I always put it in square brackets. Don't ask me why I always put that tag in square brackets, because I don't know, except I think it's easier to read. When I haven't had it there, my eye doesn't scan the line quite as easily. And it might be because I'm dyslexic, that it just helps me. But I always put it in square brackets. So I'd end up with something like that. So I might have a shoot for Rome, a shoot for the Smith wedding, something like that. But then if you've got that, if you don't need that extra level, your folder structure might look something like this, where you've just got the year and then the shoot folder, which is the date with the tag at the end of it for organisation. Now that might sound like a lot of work to create that, but it is possible to automate that. And my process is almost completely automated by Lightroom. And I'm going to talk about how to do that and how it's going to use that date from that you set in the camera to do it, which is why I said right at the beginning, get your date right in the camera, because that will help you further on. I'm going to talk about that next week, about the automation side of it, how to set it up in Lightroom, and hopefully in another application as well, so that you've got options there. But I'm going to look also about file names with a little bit later on in this live stream. So I'm not talking continuously on this. Let's take a break from this and I'll come back to it. So before we go into the 3-minute challenge, let me just review what people have got in the chat at the moment. So we've got various people talking about their file naming convention, date, shoot name, camera, shot number. Very similar actually to what I use. I'll read that all properly and I'll talk about it after the 3-minute challenge, I think. I think some of those I need to think about before I comment on them. So let me play in the 3-minute challenge, my edit of Terry's image. Hello, welcome to another 3-minute Lightroom challenge. This time I've been provided with an image by Terry Hewitt. So as ever, I have 3 minutes to do an edit in Lightroom. So let me get the timer started and let's see what we make of it. Okay, the timer has started. Okay, so it's a scenic image. Let's go into the develop module and have a look at it. Right, okay, let's zoom in. Ooh, it's slightly out of focus, I would say, Terry. Let me go full screen so that you can see this a lot better. There's a little grain on there. That's our subject, slightly out of focus. Right, let's see what we can do with it. First thing, we need to correct that horizon. So crop tool, R on the keyboard. Will auto do it? Sort of. Right, okay, so now let's crop in a little bit. I'd like to try and get that on the 1/3 line. It's not perfectly straight, even using that. So there's the horizon. Yep, okay, out of there. Now it's a little bit underexposed. We can see up on the histogram that we've got a lot of space up there. So I can afford to bring that up a bit. Now, lens corrections. I've got 1 minute 50 seconds left. Put those on. Right, so back to basic. What am I going to do with this? I'll bring out a bit more detail in the shadows if I can. I think the dehaze is going to be helping here. Bring up the colour on there. Yes, quite like that. Right, 6-second exposure. There is noise in there. Have I got time to do some noise correction? So detail. Noise reduction, a little bit there. Hold down the Alt key and look at that. No, that's, yeah, okay. Need to bring back, oh, I've got 1 minute left. Bring back a little bit more in those shadows. Right, bring that up. That's looking okay. I like the negative space on there. Do I want it in colour or black and white? Black and white. Oh, black and white's interesting. What happens if I go with my standard black and white 3 on there? Yeah, that works. That works okay. I've got 35 seconds, and with that, I'm going to bump up the contrast just a little bit. I'm going to use the dehaze because that will help make it a bit more moody on there. Don't like those shadows. Want me detail back? Come on. Exposure. Ooh, that's about it. I've got 16 seconds on a graduated filter on here, and just bring that down on there. Bring the exposure down very slightly to make that a bit more moody at the top. Move it up just a fraction more. And time's up. Right, okay, so that was my edit. Thanks for sending it in that it's a scenic. I've so far most of these 3-minute challenges have been ones that have been people, whereas this, nice to have a scenic image. I ran out of time. There's a couple of extra things I would have done with it had I had a little bit more time. First of all, I would have actually put in, the next stage I was going to do was to add in a vignette. So I would have just brought that down a little bit more in there, just to sort of bring that in and feather it off. So I would have probably done that, and I would have done another thing. I would have put another graduate filter on. So M again, this time just a little bit higher up as we're layering that, and bring down the exposure just slightly, and a little bit of dehaze on there just to make it quite dark, and it just adds this sort of extra level to it. So I'm afraid I ran out of time on doing those, but that would be fairly close to my final image on there. But as regards to the image itself, I'll give the feedback a little bit later in the show. So back to me in the future. See you later. Right, and I'm back. Microphone working? Yeah, right. I'm getting paranoid about that microphone now. As you saw there, very different approaches between what I did and what Rick did. I'll talk about that when we do the feedback section a little bit later. But let's move on. Somebody suggested, I can't remember who it was who came up with the idea, that I ought to have an image of the week to talk about in each of these shows. So very quickly, here's my image of the week. Actually, it was I posted it online. I think it was about a week ago. It was something I spotted in Lisbon, and just the little sticker on the pedestrian crossing, and I thought it was amusing at the time. And then I rediscovered it a week or so back and thought just how relevant it is. I just wish I could go and press that button. In fact, I think there'd probably be a very long queue for people wanting to press that button at the moment. Photographically, the things to say about it. Oh, excuse me. Was I did very deliberately choose the shallow depth of field. The background's a bit noisy. You can just about make out that there's a car parked there on that, but I wanted the focus to be on the button. In post-production, very little in terms of editing on it. A little bit of a boost to both the vibrance and to the contrast by means of the clarity slider. And I corrected the uprights on it, and that was all I had to do with that. So nice, simple image. Well, let's talk about something a little bit more interesting than mine. We move on, and this is an image that was sent to me by Gary Platt. Now I'm just going to move over to Lightroom and talk about it in there, because this is quite interesting. So. Nope, just a moment. Right, I've got the image up in Lightroom. So this is from a show up in Edinburgh, I believe, a group called Floating Flowers. Now, when I first saw this image, Gary sent it to me in case I wanted it for the critiquing last week, but at the point I got it, we were already oversubscribed with a number of images for that. When he sent it, I thought, wow, that is a fantastic image, and I wanted to talk about it, so I thought I'd save it for today. And I sent Gary a message saying, yeah, I'm doing this one today, and he offered to send me the raw file, and I'm really glad he did, because it completely changed my perception of what it is. I still think it's a fantastic image, but I thought it was something completely different when I saw it originally. What I thought I was looking at was some form of studio shoot where it was one dancer with multiple flashes going off to freeze them in different positions. However, having seen the raw file and seen Gary's explanation that it was a production up in Edinburgh, I now know it is multiple dancers. And what Gary has said was that although this is a 6-second exposure, I think it was 6 seconds? No, 2 seconds. Hang on, let me get the 2 seconds. Yeah, a 2-second exposure at f16. He was doing it handheld, because they didn't allow tripods in there, which makes it all the more remarkable as images go. And what I like about it, composition-wise, is you've got the one figure in the foreground that's capturing our attention, but with all these ghostly shapes behind that act as a framing mechanism. Now, Gary did send me, as I said, the raw file. Let me just go over to the raw file. Yeah, that's the raw file on there, which has got the processing in it because Gary included the XMP file, but it's a slightly different crop. And he's cropped it to take out the heads of the audience in the foreground. And that is the thing that made the difference to me, because as I say, I thought it was in a studio. Once I'd seen that, it's a show. And I think, and this might be because I am a theatre photographer, I actually prefer it with the heads of the audience in there, because I think that gives it a context then, that it's a performance that we're actually looking at. I would do a slightly different crop to the one Gary had, and that being, I would take out a little bit more of the negative space at the top. It's good that it's there, because it could be, if it was used as a promotional image of some description, that negative space would be where you would put text. So I would do a slightly different crop. I don't like cropping through people's heads, so I bring that out and probably try and bring that out a little bit like that. And that for me would probably be my preferred crop, possibly clean up just a little bit round here on there. How sharp is it? That is remarkably sharp for a 2-second exposure. I mean, Gary, I've got to say, I am really, really envious of that. Getting dance photos in the theatre is one of the hardest things to achieve, and to actually to get that one, hats off to you, mate. That is a cracking shot. With the post-production work that's gone on it, and I've not seen this before, I've not looked at it in advance, I'm just going to reset so we can see what it looked like out of camera. That's interesting. There's been some cleanup of these lines here, and I had no idea they were there. Control Z, put that back in. Yep. Again, absolutely well done. It's one of those images where I haven't really got much to say as alternatives with it on there, other than that slightly different crop and to keep the audience in there for me. I don't know what other people think. Do you want to put in the chat whether people agree with me or not? My shoulders are broad enough if you don't agree with me about the audience being in the image on that. So I get back to my standard view. Yep, here we go. Minimize that. Right. Yeah, okay. I was just checking to see if there's anything in the chat there. There isn't. So let's just move on. And let's move on to file naming conventions. And at this point, I want to just talk about the feedback in the chat that people have said. Most people have been using a naming convention which is year, month, shoot name, or year, month, date, that type of approach, which is more or less what I'm going to advocate. We've got a comment from Michael saying he tends to just stick with the default naming straight out of camera. I've got to say, Michael, that's not a good idea for all sorts of reasons, but not least of all that you can end up with a name clash with your images. So sod's law is at some point you're going to output an image from 2 different shoots at 2 different times, and they're going to end up with exactly the same name. Now, that might not be a major inconvenience to you, but if you're ever thinking of supplying images to somebody else, that might become a problem, as I'll touch on. Terry has said that he's read somewhere that because Lightroom can sort by date anyway, there's no need to organize your images by date in terms of folders and file names. I've read that. I really do not agree with it as an approach. And the reason being is that is fine if all you're ever going to do with your images is entirely within Lightroom. Once you come out of Lightroom, that then starts to break down. You could potentially have naming clashes, as we've already talked about. And the argument doesn't hold water anyway. Just because you can organize by date, yes, you can. But you can also organize by keyword. You can organize and search by title. And it's actually easier to do that than to organize by date. So why not file by the thing that's harder to sort by and search on the things which are easier to search by, which is what I would recommend with that. Whoa, lots more comments coming in. Let me see. Oh yeah. Terry doesn't like the audience. Ron doesn't like the audience. Tim does like the audience. Kev, depends on the purpose. Yeah, I think Kev, you probably hit the nail on the head with saying it depends on the purpose. If it was for theatre promotion, then it's good to show the audience. But if it's a standalone piece of art, he prefers it without. I guess because I come from a theatre background, seeing an audience in there just makes me relate to it a little bit better, whether it's standalone or promotional for that matter, for me. Right, okay, carrying on with naming conventions. Let's move on. Having that structure that I talked about earlier is only half the story. The other half is naming those files and why we need to do it. Now, as I always said, whatever software you use to transfer your images onto the computer can and should do that naming for you. So it's a case of coming up with a naming convention that works with the software that you're going to be using. So Lightroom will help you do it. Things like Darktable will help you do it. You can get freestanding downloader software that will help you do it as well. The main reason why you want to take control of it is, as I've said, it gives you that unique name. So you're never going to get a name clash within your images at some point in the future. And that's important if ever you're trying to sell your images. But it also tells you where that image is filed, because I can look at any of my images, because part of the file name is the date. That tells me in that structure that I've described exactly where to go and look for it. So it's an easy way to locate an image. Now, why would that be important to me? Let me give you a real life example. I had a phone call some years ago with someone who was trying to track down the relatives of an old lady who died, and they couldn't find the relatives, and they'd spotted an image, a family group photo on the mantelpiece, and they'd taken it out, and my contact details were on the back of the photo. They phoned me up, they explained the situation, and they said, if we describe the image, is there any way you could work out who on earth the family is in the photo, so that we could track down this person's relatives? And at which point I said, well, a description is going to be tricky. They said, well, we can always send it to you. I said, well, there should be a reference number written on the back. Now, my reference number is actually my file name. So I got them to read that out to me. And whilst they were on the phone, within a few minutes, and actually within a few seconds, I was able to pull up the image on my screen, and to confirm that we both knew we were both looking at the same image, I asked them to describe one of the people in the image, and I then described somebody else in the image to them, so we were able to confirm it really was that image and that family. And I was able to say who I did the shoot for, who I supplied the image to, and I didn't actually give them the contact details, because once I told them who the family was, they said, yeah, that doesn't help, because that's the family of the woman's next door neighbour. So didn't actually help, but I was able to track somebody down literally within 30 seconds of being given that number, because of that naming convention on there. And if anyone does stock photography, one of the conditions is that you have a unique file name within your images. It doesn't matter if your file name clashes with somebody else, but you can't submit two images with the same file name. And if you're just using the out of camera one, you're going to start running into problems with that. And date-based allows you to come up with a system, which means you will never get a duplicate file name. So what is my file naming convention? Well, here's mine. It's 4Ys MMDD, which is the date, J, a job code, hyphen, C, which tells me the camera, and NNN is the suffix on there. Very similar to what other people were using. So there's an example of it. So that would be 2018, May the 22nd, job A, camera G, which is my 5D on there. So that's the date taken, fairly obvious. The job code is, I have put a job code in there because I may occasionally do two completely unrelated jobs in the same day. So for example, I might be doing a portrait session during the day and doing a theatre job in the evening, and I want to file those in different folders, and I want to make sure the images are completely separate. So that, what I didn't show in that file structure before was that extra character goes in there. I don't use I or O as a job code, and I've never needed more than 11, and I have no idea what I'd do if I had 24 jobs in a day, apart from celebrate that I've got so much work coming in. Then the other part, the camera or photographer code in there. That's important to me if I'm doing a multiple camera shoot, which doesn't happen very often, or more likely if I've got somebody shooting alongside me. For example, Terry Hewitt works with me on theatre photography, and so I have a letter that indicates that these images aren't mine, they have come from a team member. So the T, I'm afraid, Terry, doesn't stand for Terry in the file naming convention. It actually stands for team member, and anyone who's shooting for me gets the same designation these days. Sorry. And I use other letters for different things. So for example, P is my my iPhone, H is my GoPro, Q is my iPad, Z is anything I've created from scratch, things like that, just so that when I look at it, I know where it's come from. Why is it important? If I've got two cameras on a shoot, there is always the chance that their sequence numbers end up in line, and I could end up with duplicate file names within a shoot if I didn't have something that distinguished between the two cameras that were involved on there. And then the last part is just the image serial number straight out of camera. Yeah, Terry just saying in the chat, and he thought he was special. Sorry, Terry. And I do have a version for when it's film, and that is the roll and frame number in there. on that. So that's my naming convention, and I think you'll find it's similar to what a lot of people are using. Those who aren't using, I would suggest you think about adopting something like that. It doesn't have to be the same as mine. Find something that works for you. The one thing I would say, and I meant to set this up to demonstrate it, let me just move back over to Lightroom and ooh, that didn't go. Do it a different way. All right, that's better. Yeah, that's working. No, it's working now. I don't know. I don't understand. Yeah, the reason one other thing to watch, and this is a trap a few people have fallen into with their naming conventions, is the length of the name. I don't know whether I can show this with this, but look what happens. It's very difficult for you to see, I know, but if you've got a long file name and a small thumbnail, the end of the file name gets chopped off. Let me demonstrate this a different way. I'm going to rename this file, and I'm going to rename it photographer theatre Edinburgh. I can't spell Edinburgh. That will do to do it. Right. Okay. Look what happens here now, up at the top. What we've got is, if you've got a long file name with a prefix to it of some sort, what gets lost at the end are the most significant digits. And I had a photographer supply images to me with his filing name. I pulled them into Lightroom, and what happened was I couldn't. I had to keep making my thumbnails bigger to be able to see the full file name, to be able to tell him what reference I was referring to on there. Because at the level I was at, they all, if those last digits were the ones that were changing, they were all showing up as Photographer Theatre Edinburgh DS, and those digits at the end were all hidden. So find a file name that's not too long so that you don't lose the most significant digits in your file name when you're viewing it in Lightroom or whatever application that you use. So that's just a little bit of a warning on that to finish with. Right, let's move on to our Lightroom 3-minute challenge and some feedback for Terry on this. And first of all, I'm going to play in Rick's feedback.
Okay, we're back in Lightroom with this image. Now, if we punch in here, one thing that we can see with this, we can see that it is out of focus and it's blurry. And I think it kind of spoils the image a little bit. Now, I don't know the circumstances behind how it was made, limitations given where you were, the conditions. Was it really, really windy? Are you able to handhold or brace the camera steadily yourself? Not everybody can do. Certain physical health conditions, what have you. Who knows? There's a lot of factors that can go into this. But it being very, very out of focus, it kind of looks like a mistake, so it's not really something that could be classed as kind of abstract really and gone that route. I would have preferred to have seen good sharp focus on whatever this is. Here, as you can tell, I'm not a landscape photographer, and actually have it sharp and in focus, and then obviously the longer exposure will do its magic on the water here. This is often done by landscape photographers on a tripod using neutral density filters. My friend Mark does this a lot, so you get a very wispy kind of sky, and of course the milky water. Same kind of thing with waterfalls. It seems like it may have been rushed a little bit. Maybe it was. The horizon was somewhat wonky. I probably would have liked to have gone a little bit further on the colours myself, but not quite this far, because they seem a little bit surreal. The greens don't really look that real on Terry's edit here. I think this is Terry's edit, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the red item here, it's going to a red kind of orange. What I will probably do in addition to mine, although that is probably, I imagine, kind of how it looks on the day, I may just, I know I'm not supposed to edit further, but here we go. Pump up the saturation just a little bit on the sky, and maybe just a touch on the red. It looks like it's had some further work done on the other edit of the file with the luminance on the red and on the greens and what have you, but I probably wouldn't really bother a whole lot with that. And that's really it. It's just technically I think it's kind of let down a little bit in terms of how it was shot, but again, it's difficult for me to sit here and say that because I don't know the circumstances. It's many factors can happen. Even if you're locked on a tripod shooting landscapes, if you've got a windy day, it can cause you a nightmare as it buffs the camera around. Sometimes, whilst generally speaking they say leave IS or in-body stabilization off when you lock down, when the camera's placed down locked on a tripod, sometimes it's worth actually having it on because it can counteract some of the wind buffeting the camera around a little bit, but it needs a little bit of experimentation to kind of know when to use that really or when not to. I mean, you're racked out to 250mm, so it's a very long lens. You know, and if you're not really locked on a solid tripod at that point, it can be very unforgiving, even with IS, especially on a long exposure. But that is my little bit of feedback on the image. Thank you very much for sending it in. Oh, actually, I do think compositionally it works. So it works well. It's a simple kind of graphic, certainly. I think under different lighting conditions, it may work in black and white better. I went to black and white first, didn't really feel like it was working, but a nice simple graphic, most certainly. Maybe a little bit of a different sky as well, but again, you kind of take the conditions that you are presented as you're passing or when you're there in the day. But thanks very much for sending it in, Terry, and we'll pass this back to Ian.
Right, we're back. Microphone's still working. Yeah, good. Right, yeah, let me move over to Lightroom and I'll show you my thoughts on all this. Oh, that's not worked. There we go. Right, okay. Yeah, I've pulled up my edit here on the right and Terry's on the left. You can see very different approaches to it. I think, Terry, Rick's covered most of the bases on this. The main thing that I spotted straight away is it's not sharp. Now, why isn't it sharp? f5.6 should be sharp. I don't know lens-wise. Now, with that focal length of 250mm, which is, let me go full screen so you can see the information better, which is 375 at 35mm. That means that, well, if you were hand holding it, and clearly you weren't hand holding it, it's very susceptible to movement. So the handheld, it would have to be 400th of a second to hand hold it. On tripod, the slightest vibration. Now that means if it was windy that day, if your camera was being blown around a little bit, you could get that little bit of motion in there. And I've seen it a lot with these long exposures, that things aren't quite as sharp. And also sometimes with a long exposure, you don't, with some cameras, it's not quite as sharp because of the exposure with it. What I do like is the concept behind it. I like the the starkness of it. I like the use of, presumably you've used neutral density filters to get the candy floss effect on the C on there, and that works really well on the image. So overall, nice concept. Execution's let down a little bit. On this one, we've got, as Rick said, that it's oversaturated, and I don't think the subject really warrants that oversaturated look to it. I think slightly desaturated, if anything, would work better on that one. And as ever, I disagree with Rick. I do think it works as a black and white on there. So, right, let me get back to my normal view and remove that. Put that back. Right, yeah. So that's my feedback on the image. And now, Q&A. I haven't seen any questions in the chat to look at this week on there. Various comments about naming that I think I've covered everything on that. So if you do have questions for me for the future, please stick them in comments, stick them in an email to me, and I'll cover them in a future show. So time to wrap up. Not quite as long as last week, but still didn't manage to get it under the hour, did I? So thank you everyone for watching. Thanks to Rick for taking part. Thank you for Terry and to Gary for supplying images for me to talk about on here. And I'll just finish with my usual sort of request. Please subscribe on YouTube. Please add comments to the feed. And if you haven't liked this the show on YouTube yet, just go and hit that like button. It really does help me on there. So what have we got for next week? Well, I've got that photographer showcase with David Jones taking part on that. Anyone else wanting to take part, do let me know, and I'll send you the details of what you need to do to be a part of that. And I'm calling next week Image Wrangling. It's basically the automated side of getting all those images into that structure that we've talked about and those naming conventions that we've talked about tonight. So it's that side of it we'll be dealing with next week. We should have a 3-minute edit. I haven't got images from anyone that I haven't previously had an image from. I have got some images from at least one person we've already done one image for, but if anybody hasn't had an image done and would like to, please get in touch, because I want to give preference to anyone we've not done an image for, but we need to know who that's going to be by the middle of the week so that Rick's got the time to do his edit before the show. And I've just noticed a question coming in. Will continuous shooting help deter the movement? Oh, I think you're referring to on Terry's image. No, because we're talking a 6-second exposure, and it's the movement we're seeing is during that 6 seconds is where the problem is. So continuous shooting, you just have one blurred for 6 seconds followed by another blurred for 6 seconds. It's basically how steady you can keep that tripod. And one technique for it, just while I think about it, is you can hang a bag or something onto the tripod, weight it down to really help make it steady when it's windy, if that's what the problem is. So yeah, do get in touch if you want to be involved with either the 3-minute edit or the showcase. Right, I'm trying to close this up and I'm getting questions coming in. Andy Grady wants to know what it is with Thespian Benny this week. Right, didn't you see the quote earlier? That which we call a rose by any other name would be so sweet. Quote from Shakespeare, which is why Benny is dressed in his Shakespearean outfit, complete with Yorick. So that's the reason for Benny dressed like that. I'm glad somebody's keeping an eye on the bear. Right, yeah, questions for Q&A, send those in as well. And that really does finally bring me to the end of the show. Thank you everyone for being part of it. And until next time, keep making great images. I'll see you all next week. Right, at this point I need to just record the alternative ending for the cut down version. Thanks for watching the cut down version of this live stream. The full version of this live stream will be available within my academy, and you can find the details of that there. It costs £6 a month to join the academy, or £60 a year. And it's not just the live streams you'll find in there, lots of other useful resources, full training courses, inspiration sheets, lighting diagrams, lots of hints and tips. So do consider doing that. And it also really helps me keep these live streams free if I can get the membership up on that academy. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Until then, keep making great photos. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down here so you'll get notified of future videos. Up here is a playlist of videos similar to this one, and here's one specific video that I think you will like, whereas down here is one that YouTube thinks you'll like. Until next time, keep making great photos. Bye for now.